Well, good evening, Spokane Public Schools families. We greatly appreciate that you're here with us this evening for our middle school webinar. My name is Adam Swinyard, and I'm the superintendent of the district. And the purpose of tonight is to provide you an update on the district's plan to continue phasing students back to in-person instruction. This evening, I'm joined with a panelist of district experts to share with you details about our plan and to answer as many questions as possible that you might have as you are listening to tonight's presentation. With us this evening is Dr. Mark Anderson, longtime Associate Superintendent, Spokane Public Schools. We have Heather Bybee. She is our Chief Academic Officer for the district. Sean Jordan, he's the executive director for all of our secondary schools. Becky Ramsey, she's our director of special education. Becky Dowdy, she's our director of health services. Sandra Gerard, our director of communications. And Jeremy Oakes, who is the principal at Sacagawea Middle School in the district. And to start out this evening, I want to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're headed. And we recognize this has been an extremely difficult time for our community and for our families and for our students. And it's been difficult in different ways for different members of our community, but nonetheless, it's been challenging in so many different ways. And we know that particularly our middle school students have been impacted by the disruption, by the transitions, by the inability to connect with their peers in the way that they typically would. And as a former middle school principal and middle school assistant principal, it's an age group that's really near and dear to my heart. And it's a great time, but it's a confusing time, and it can be a challenging time. And it's a time where they're growing and changing in so many different ways. And their relationship with their peers, with their teachers, with their family, with you as their parents and guardians, things are all changing and evolving. So it's our intent and has been every step of the way to be as student focused and do everything we can to support our kids, regardless of the grade level, as we navigate such an unprecedented circumstance and a situation where there at no point has there been any easy answers to how to navigate the pandemic. And last March, when we received orders from the governor to close our schools, and our teachers were forced overnight to shift to a virtual learning environment and had to quickly adapt, and our students had to quickly adapt. And as we emerged from last spring, we engaged in a very detailed and long process of planning for a variety of different scenarios this school year. And Dr. Anderson facilitated a task force comprised of 150 community members, parents, teachers, educational experts, and staff across our school district to think through what will it look like if our students are in a distance learning model, and what will it look like if our students return in a hybrid model, and how will we navigate that road. And through that process, we closely examined how will we make decisions, how will we determine the right path ahead. And part of that has involved looking and evaluating the way in which we've always made decisions related to the safety and health of our students and staff. And the district has always operated by following the guidelines and regulations of our public health officials. And on any typical school day, we're following literally hundreds of guidelines and regulations to keep our over 30,000 students and almost 4,000 staff members across 54 buildings safe. And it was determined very early on in the pandemic that the district would be steadfast in following the guidance of public health officials, and that we wouldn't at any time begin the process of picking and choosing which health guidelines to follow. And that, in fact, the public health agencies that have direct jurisdiction over Spokane County would be the ones that we would be walking hand in hand with. And that's the Washington State Department of Health and the Spokane Regional Health District. As we've moved through this year and we've maintained close contact with them, we obviously started the year with the majority of our students in a distance learning model. We did have students in small groups in special education and English language development programs attending in person from the very beginning in September. And as we walked hand in hand with our health officials and received their guidance, Our commitment was to bring students back as quickly as we could based on their recommendations. And we started bringing kindergartners back in early October. And we have now returned all of our elementary grade levels to either full-time instruction or a hybrid model. And per those conversations, we have received their guidance and support to now bring our secondary students back to in-person instruction. Clearly, there's differences between secondary and elementary and how the schools function, the way in which students move around the buildings, the way in which their classes are scheduled, and the way in which they intend and engage in instruction. And what you're going to hear tonight is an outline of what that process will look like. And you will hear that there has been a significant amount of planning around the logistics in order to keep our students safe, ensure that we maintain and have high levels of fidelity to the safety guidelines that have been laid out by the Department of Health, and to create an environment that's as conducive as possible for high quality teaching and learning. And you'll have an opportunity to hear those details this afternoon. We can share with you that since the beginning of the school year, we've only had 10 situations in which transmission of COVID has been epidemiologically linked to our school. We've contact traced thousands of individuals that represent hundreds of cases that people have contracted COVID in their personal lives. And each time there's a confirmed positive case, as you'll hear in this presentation, we have a team of contact tracers that work quickly. They do that work 24/7. They identify where their epidemiological link and where transmission has occurred. And we are tracking and reporting all that data on our district website. And to this point, we've only had 10 transmissions, which is reflective of national and statewide trends that if the safety protocols and guidelines are followed, that in fact transmission inside of schools is extremely rare. No public health official and no public school official will tell you that there is a no risk environment. There's no such thing as a no risk environment. But what the data indicates is that schools are a very low risk, and that transmission is in fact very rare. So for some of you, that news comes much too late, and that you would have liked to see the district bring secondary students back much sooner. And for some of you, this is much too early, and you would like to see the district wait. And we've heard that as a consistent narrative. And again, our commitment is to follow the guidance of our public health officials and follow their recommendations. And at times that has really frustrated open school advocates, and at times that has frustrated closed school advocates. And we certainly recognize that there are varying opinions and feelings about this topic. And we respect those feelings and opinions. And the district is going to continue to be steadfast to walk alongside our public health officials and return our students based on their guidance and their recommendations. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Anderson, who's going to facilitate tonight's presentation.
Well, thank you, Dr. Swinyard. We will get started here. Hang on just a sec. So Dr. Swinyard went over kind of the background for tonight. We are going to do a presentation. As we're doing the presentation, you can type into the chat questions you might have. And at the end, Heather Bybee, our Chief Academic Officer, will serve as moderator and answer some of the frequently asked questions to our various panelists this evening. Dr. Swinyard introduced our panel this evening, and these are the various task groups that work since all summer. As Adam said, about 150 staff members, community members, health experts joined our team. We had a safety and operations committee that is continuing to meet and provide guidance to our teachers and staff and parents and students as we brought more and more students back. There was an elementary educational committee, a secondary one, special ed services committee, English as a second language committee, intervention services, technology support, And then the full distance learning option that we developed is called Spokane Virtual Academy. Then Mr. Jordan, Sean Jordan, who's on the call with us tonight, has been working very carefully on the extracurricular activities now that have been approved by the state, and we'll talk about that this evening in the webinar. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Bybee, who's our Chief Academic Officer, and she can talk about the hybrid schedule that your students will start next week.
Thanks, Dr. Anderson. So lots of questions about what does hybrid mean? So in terms of our 7th and 8th grade students, it is students going to school on an A-B rotation with alternating Fridays. So starting on Monday, students who are in the A group will attend school in person, while students in the B group will attend to their studies remotely. And then it flip-flops. Now you see March 5th is left off because that's a learning improvement day, so there's no rotation on that day. But then on March 10th would be the first group of Fridays, which would serve Group A. We have calendars available that we'll send out that are also downloadable off the district website. And so that'll be part of our family communication going out so that you're always connected to which day it is for your student. In terms of the bell schedule for middle school, with the return of students, we're going back to the traditional middle school schedule, which normally has a 9 o'clock start time. You'll see that we have an abbreviated drop-off time, and that's really to limit the amount of students being on campus without supervision so that they can get checked in and get on to their class to kind of minimize that transition time. You'll also see that school is released at 2:55. That's roughly 35 minutes earlier than what a traditional year would be. And that's because that time is set aside for teachers to attend to their students who are learning remotely that day, to be able to answer questions, get the things needed for those students so that they're ready for in-person the following day. And then you see the pickup time is right there at 3 o'clock. So again, it's just a few minutes of a window to have students picked up and off campus. So breakfast and lunch will be provided. That'll be part of the details we go into here in a few slides. And that the expectation is that students come with their laptops charged and ready for school, because that will be part of the learning experience, and that they bring them back and forth each day. In terms of what will be happening during the school day, it's a traditional 6-period day with advisory class, knowing that that anchored experience, particularly for middle school students, is critical. I always said, I too was a middle school teacher, that advisory, that's my family, that's my home. Those are the kids that I make sure I know everything about. And so we know how critical that is to be part of our experience. So students will start their day in advisory. They'll transition through a 6-period day. We'll go into how kids transition here in a few minutes. But we just want you to know that the support staff, including administrators, counselors, MTSS specialists, intervention teachers, all of our office staff, our custodial staff, they're all going to be there ready to greet and support your students. So we just want you to know that the primary focus of transitioning them back to in-person is to first make sure that we create that safe community for them. I know there's anxiety out there, and our staff is ready to greet and to meet those demands. So during the hybrid model, when students are engaging in distance learning, they'll have designated time, as I said, that 2:55 to 3:30, where they can check in with their teachers each day to say, this is what was where I got hung up. And for those who are kind of trying to grapple with what does instruction look like, I always say that it kind of goes with the model that I do, we do, you do, which is an instructional strategy. And so teachers will be focused on engaging the students in person and then giving them the extension of what they need to be doing at home. And I would predict that most teachers will have an exit task at the end of each class that says, what are you doing tomorrow? What are the questions you need to think about? How have you laid out your time for the day? And then they'll have that time sectioned at the end of the day where they can check in and ask those questions to make sure they're prepped for their in-person instructional day.
So Heather, you mentioned that students should plan to bring their laptops
Yes.
each day. I guess Mr. Jordan Is kind of a backpack the recommended, because are students going to be able to use their lockers? Or?
Right, we're not going to use lockers when we return, and so we're asking students to carry all their belongings with them in their backpack to all of their classes, including their laptop. And the backpack is the safest way to transport the computer, the laptop back and forth between home and school. So that's what we're recommending. And as Heather mentioned, we're reminding them to charge it each evening, so it's ready to go in the morning when they come to school.
Thank you very much. So one of the important things that we have learned both from our health officials and then from having kindergarten through sixth grade back is making sure that all of the adults and the students that are in school are not sick given the COVID pandemic. And so I'm going to ask Heather, I'm going to ask Becky Dowdy, our Director of Health Services, to describe, what we're looking for, or what you should be looking for as parents, for your students to not send them to school if they have any of these signs.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. So really, in a year, we don't want our staff or students to come to our buildings while they're not well. And of course, that's even more important this year. And so we're really looking for symptoms that could be related to COVID. And as we all know, at this point in time, almost any viral symptom can be related to the virus. And so we're really looking carefully at these symptoms that kids might have in the morning before they come to school. So a cough, a fever, shortness of breath, loss of taste or smell, any sort of stomach issues. We really just want to know that our staff and students are healthy. And so we want to make sure that we are able to check that in the morning and to be able to partner with families and have families do some of this checking before the kids come to school, so that we're not having to line kids up at the door and do all of the checking that way. And so again, we're really partnering with families by using this health app that our tech team developed. And I think Dr. Anderson is going to talk a little bit about how you access this.
So we do have a health check app that you can get it right at our SpokaneSchools.org health check. We're asking parents to complete that health check 30 minutes before the student arrives to school, or 30 minutes before getting on the bus. And the information then comes, it's very simple. You can download it on your iPhone, you can, or on your smartphone, you can bookmark it on your computer, but it's a few simple questions like Becky just went through about signs of COVID, and then you hit submit and it comes to our school office staff, teachers, administrators. And then next, we are going to ask for students to do a confirmation that it's been done. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Jordan to describe the process that'll go on. It may vary from school to school a little, but most schools will be having students check in with a staff member at a particular place. Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Anderson. And this has been a part of the detailed planning that our principals have been doing in preparation for next week. Having a plan for students entering the building, and prior to that, confirming that they've completed the health check. It does vary from school to school in terms of how they're grouping the students and where they enter. And there's going to be communication coming to each student and family about the location for each particular student in terms of where they enter. And upon entering, some middle schools are doing it based on grade level. Some are doing it based on the location of the advisory. That's the first class period that the student will be attending in the day. Some of it are doing by teams if the student is in a team. So it will vary where they enter, and the group that they're entering with will vary from middle school to middle school. Some schools are using they're providing 2 lines at each entry for depending on how the student is confirming their health check. Some students have smartphones where they can show that they've completed it with a green check. Other students will just use their ID badge, which has a barcode on it that will scan very quickly, that will provide a laptop that's there with the scanner will give us the information that it's been completed. Schools are also planning to have a separate entrance for students who, for whatever reason, didn't complete the health check, so that staff can work with them to complete that, do a temperature check, and then get them to their advisory as well.
And are the students going to be coming to the same entry every day? They're assigned, this is where you go every day?
That will be the plan, is that every student will enter the same place, and for the most part, it will be the same staff that will be greeting them each morning to do the health check. And we know from talking to some of our neighboring districts who have already been through this process that it will take us a little longer, the first week and a half, as we develop kind of the routine. But once that process gets developed at each school with each student group, it takes about 10 minutes total to get most of the largest groups in each entry.
And the information that the parents enter at home, either on their smartphone or computer, that gets translated through our software onto the student's ID badge.
Correct. Each ID badge has a barcode on it. Some schools are using a notebook that has each student's name with their particular barcode, so they'll scan it really quickly, and that barcode will bring up that student's specific information, their specific health check completed that particular day.
So for parents and guardians, we do plan to send you after, I think it's Wednesday night, I believe, that Sandra Gerard and her team at Communication will send you a whole bunch of information, including a little tutorial on how to use, a little video on how to use and download the Health Check app on your computer or on your phone.
Mark, I might add that one of the things schools are doing as a part of their communication to students and families prior to that first day, so that each student knows where they're to enter, is sending the family and student a map of the school campus with the identified entry points and the assignment for that particular student.
So Jeremy, is that something then that SAC parents would receive, kind of where their student is supposed to go that first day?
Yeah, so at all the middle schools are kind of like Sean talked about, Mr. Jordan talked about, they're all doing something a little bit different based on the scale and what the entrances look like in the schools. But like for our school, all of our schools have a transition plan in place. So our students, beginning this week in advisory, we started going through the maps. We started practicing what the entrance could look like. We started practicing the attestations. And then every school has a transition activity for our incoming 7th graders and new to SAC 8th graders, for instance, for us. So at that, we're going to have, the kids are going to come into our school. We're going to practice attestation. That's on the 24th and the 25th, specific for SAC. We're going to have the A days come on Wednesday. The B kids come on Thursday. And when they come in, we're going to have basically a day in the life of a Sacagawea student, packet ready to go. That's going to have the students are going to go through their day. They're going to get their bell schedule. They're going to touch all their teachers' classes. They're going to say hi to their teachers. They're going to walk the halls exactly like they would on that first day. And then they're going to exit out the exterior doors of their home-based teacher's classroom just like they would. And it's going to give the practice with the social distancing and try to get kids as ready as we can just to eliminate some of the anxiety.
Very good. So more to follow, more training and information to follow from both the district office, from our communications department, and then it sounds like each school is sending families some more information about the health check and how to get going there. We are offering school meal programs. Both breakfast and lunch now are free for all students through June 30th of this year. This is a federal program during COVID that they are providing free breakfast and lunch for students. And to find out the meals for each day, you can go to spokaneschools.org/meals. The meals are much simpler than they were during the normal school year. They are served as a unit. As students come in and finish their health check, if they want a breakfast, they can go down to the cafeteria. It's a grab and go breakfast, simple menu like a breakfast bar, bagel, muffin, juice, and they take that then to their first period class. And that's where they can eat their breakfast during that first period class. At lunch, each school is a little different. The The food will be served in the cafeteria, again, kind of a grab and go. But I guess I would like Jeremy and Sean to talk a little bit about where students will be seated, assigned, how different schools are doing. Some are using chairs, some are using tables. So maybe you can describe how lunch will work.
Yeah, well, I'll start. And also with the grab and go breakfast, most of the schools are planning to have a grab and go station right there where the student enters, so that they can quickly go to their advisory class and they don't need to go to the cafeteria. So that's some of the work and planning that's been going on relative to that. I'll just talk again about, in general, about our middle school's plan for lunch. It varies again from school to school based on just the number of students that each school has and the capacity of the cafeteria. Many of them are using chairs only that are set up, spaced out with that 6 feet between chairs for the social distancing protocol. So when students grab their lunch, they'll sit in an assigned seat. Schools are using some other spaces for overflow if the cafeteria doesn't have enough room to hold all students, and most of them don't, need some additional space, such as the library or the gym, in order to spread students out appropriately. And I'll just let Jeremy add anything specific that he would like to share relative to Sacagawea.
Thanks, Sean. At SAC, we have a blend of things. I would start with just the breakfast. We're going to have grab and go stations kind of throughout. So the kids are going to grab and go when they get off the bus or get dropped off from parents, and then they'll make their way to the advisor's classroom. And we will already practice that both in the sneak peek on the 24th and the 25th and in advisory all week. So the kids will have seen it several times, and then we'll do it again in those those opening procedures for the first few days with kids. We're going to review everything again just to really make them really comfortable. And then in regards to lunch, at SAC, we're using a mix of everything. So we're going to have our ID badges all ready to go for kids. We're going to hand out an advisory. We're going to be serving lunches in both the cafeteria, and we set up a satellite cafeteria in our gym. So we have a little satellite cafeteria ready to go. The kids are going to be seated alphabetical based for COVID tracing purposes and based off their advisor classes, so they can sit with kids that they're accustomed to, that they know, and then that'll be ready to go in both those sites.
I think one thing to add is just that there will be seating charts set up for lunch, and that will be the place where each student sits every day.
And we'll learn a little bit later here with our Director of Health Services why that's important, in that if we have a student that may have been identified exposed to COVID, then it really helps us do our contact tracing, and Becky can talk about that here in a little bit. We also have the grab and go meals available at the end of the day for those students who want one during their day of virtual learning. So if you're a student A and you come on Monday, at the end of the day, you can grab a breakfast and lunch, take it home with you for the Tuesday when you're doing your virtual day, and then back you come to school on Wednesday. Transportation. We're all ready to go with transportation. Students do need to do the health check prior to getting on the bus. Students will be required to wear face coverings while on the bus and at the bus stop. Buses are being thoroughly cleaned in between each run. Our provider, Durham Contract Transportation, is making sure the buses are clean between each run. We are running the buses with the windows down. If you've seen elementary schools, that's a recommendation by the health department to increase airflow inside the buses. So during these colder winter months, please have your students wear coats, dress warmly. The transportation information is available at our website, including the routes. If you haven't got registered yet to ride a bus, please get registered this week so that your student can ride the bus starting next week. It shows the pickup and drop-off times, the stop locations, etc. All of that's available on our school district website under transportation. With that, I'm going to next move into probably the most important part of tonight's training about health and safety. And Becky Dowdy, our Director of Health Services, have been working very closely with both the health department, our staff, her nursing staff, to make sure these practices are, and we're going to cover face coverings, the health check, hygiene practices, physical distancing, signs of COVID at school. We also now have been authorized as one of a few districts that's doing school-based COVID testing, and Becky will talk about that. And then we'll talk about some of the training available. So with that, Becky, talk to us about face masks. What kind of face covering should students come to school with? What if they forget, etc.?
Yes, masks, something we've been talking about a lot this year. What we're looking for is students to be wearing a cloth face mask, similar to what everybody is wearing out in the grocery store, out in the world. They can certainly also wear a disposable surgical mask. And, you know, I'm like everybody else, I'm following the conversation around double masking at this point in time. And that's certainly not something that we would completely understand if students are double masked. That would be, you know, the choice of the family, not mandated at this time by the local health department. But again, they can use a disposable surgical mask. They can use a gaiter if it has 2 layers of fabric. That has been approved by the local health department. And if a student can't wear a face covering, there really needs to be a medical reason for that. And we need a note from the provider saying that the student cannot wear a face covering safely. And those notes from providers, I personally vet each one of those to make sure that we have a really good reason for that student not being able to wear any sort of face covering. And even with those kids, we do try to work on, you know, wearing a face shield. You know, so we do really try to eventually move towards everyone being able to do that. But for those kids who really cannot, for safety reasons, we do require a note from the doctor. Face shields, the kids can wear those. They have the option as long as the face shield has the skirting at the bottom. But our teaching staff, when they are in front of the classroom and they're providing instruction, they can just wear a face shield when they're distanced at the front of the class so that students can see their facial expressions and their mouth. But when the teachers move away from that instructional space, they of course need to be wearing a face mask. So I think that probably Sean wanted to talk about staff, how they work with students who are maybe not willing to keep their mask on.
Well, we obviously are going to do lots of communication to reinforce the expectations and the need for every student and staff member to follow our safety protocols so we keep everyone safe. And obviously we know that there may be times when a student is not following through those expectations, and we are going to provide reminders to those students. We've asked teachers to do that in our trainings. And when we're not getting that cooperation, we're gonna have our teachers partner with our administration to work in supporting that student to meet our expectations. We always, as well, partner with our parents and our families when we are struggling with getting the follow through on expectations. But that'll be kind of our plan. That's our interest, is to work with each individual student, help support them, understand why they're struggling maybe with meeting our expectations. That's always a part of the process.
And I would add to that too, that, you know, one of the things that we heard really early on is there's no way those kindergartners are going to wear those masks, and it's going to be really hard, and they're going to take them off all the time, and it's really going to be harder with younger elementary students. And you know what? Every step of the way, our kids, they're so resilient, and our staff are incredibly hardworking and very thoughtful about teaching expectations and routines, as Sean mentioned. And our kindergartners, they're amazing. I visited almost every kindergarten classroom. They do a great job wearing their masks. They wear them while they're eating. They take them up and down between bites. It's really an incredible sight to see. And we are very confident that our secondary, our middle and high school students can rise to the same level that our kindergarten students have. And there'll be times and there'll be moments, and Jeremy would be able to speak to this as a middle school principal, where on any typical school day, middle schoolers have to be reminded about safety and expectations. And day in, day out, by and large, they do a really good job. There'll be absolutely a heightened sense of accountability for all the adults in the building, making sure kids are doing that and reinforcing it. And they'll take it really seriously. and we're confident that they are going to rise to the occasion just like our elementary kids have.
And I would just say again, as we've partnered with our colleagues in other districts who have been doing in-person learning, they have shared that students have been so excited to come back to school. They have this has not been an issue for them. Students have been following through with those expectations.
And Becky, if folks forget their masks, if students forget their masks, I understand each school has a supply of disposable masks.
We do, yes. Each office has boxes of disposable surgical masks, and I know many teachers are accessing those so that they can have them in the classroom just in case we have a student who forgets or loses their mask.
Yeah, and hey, I just wanted to follow up for what Mr. Swinyard and both what Nurse Becky said about teaching the students the procedures and the routines about mask wearing. We have multiple ways that we're really trying to just build the capacity of our kids to understand how important it is. We have videos that are built through advisory for our students to watch that our other students built, which are going to be pretty cool. We have multiple videos and lessons specifically on mask wearing in all of our different locations throughout our schools. I know all of the middle schools are kind of following that ritual and routine of really building the capacity of our kids. So we feel really confident that our kids are going to be with us and they're going to do great.
And hygiene practices, Becky, I understand we're going to really be teaching students about the proper hand washing and hand sanitizer. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm sure all middle school students are avid hand washers already. So, but yeah, we're reinforcing that more this year than we have even in years before. So we're going to be encouraging students to wash their hands when they start the day, before they eat, after they eat, before they head home. We're also making sure that hand sanitizer is available in all of our buildings, very easily accessible. Of course, there is adult supervision with hand sanitizer use, but that is available for kids, and that's something that is just new with the pandemic. In past years, we didn't necessarily have that provided for students, but we do now. And our custodial staff does an amazing job already cleaning all of our shared spaces, and they are doing that even more so now with enhanced cleaning of all of the areas that kids are touching, desks, light switches, doorknobs, bathrooms. So that is really being well attended to by our custodial staff.
Then Mr. Jordan, I understand that each teacher in the classroom, they have a cleaning caddy that has disinfectant and wipes and so forth, and that since students are exchanging class, that there will be some type of method used to clean the desks before the next group of kids come in.
Correct. And we have set up a couple of different protocols and a couple different chemicals depending on whether there's a very quick cleaning that happens in between the class periods, and we have a no wipe chemical that takes about 5 minutes, that is a fine mist is sprayed on the tabletops and dries within 5 minutes, and then that disinfects that desk. And so we're asking teachers to do that for each desk. Some classrooms are able to set up where they have blue dots and red dots, and so students will alternate class periods sitting in those two different types of labels. And some are not able to do that, and so all the desks that students use will need to be disinfected between each period. But the teacher will do that right at the end of each class period while the transition happens between classes. And so it sets up a disinfected table or desk for the new student coming in for the next period.
And I understand actually we did some training with our teachers today about this, and there's actually some training videos and material going out to teachers, and then the principals will be supporting them if they have questions about that.
Correct. And this has been another one of the planning conversations that principals have had to be really clear about that protocol, make sure each teacher's comfortable with it. And so that's the process that we've been in preparing for March 1st.
Then social distancing, I understand, Becky, that this is one of the kind of the strict rules of the health department, that students, when they're sitting or standing in line or at lunch, tell us about the 6-foot rule and why.
Well, I mean, that's a part of our life now, everywhere we go, right? So, so yes, it is the guidance of our local health department that students are kept 6 feet apart. And that is obviously for droplet transmission. We're trying to keep enough distance that that is not happening when people are talking and are in close proximity to each other. So it is about droplet transmission, and that is our goal, is to keep the kids 6 feet apart. And I know we're going to have success with that.
And Mr. Jordan, you really can't keep kids 6 feet apart when they're passing between periods. What's going to be the instructions to students then?
Yeah, and the passing periods are 4 minutes, so they're quick. Masks need to be on, and it is a reality, even with only half the students in the school, that depending on the layout of the school building, that it will be difficult in the passing periods from classroom to their next classroom. It's one of the reasons why we're not using lockers. We don't want any students to be stopping in the hallways. We want students moving very quickly to get to the next classroom. Depending on the school, some schools are setting up hallways so that they're one directional only, and they're going to be teaching and training students around that. Unfortunately, and that's ideal to help kind of reduce the volume in the hallway. But that isn't possible in every school with every hallway. And so the 2-directional hallways, again, will have training to help make that be as efficient, quickly as possible.
And Jeremy, I understand each school has been given kind of dots, social distancing markers on the floors for, like, if you have to stand in line to get your lunch, or if you're going to the office. Are those scattered throughout each school?
Yeah, they are. So I'll use our school as an example. So when you walk in, you'll see we have the dots throughout all of the main traffic areas in our school. If anywhere where there's going to be folks waiting in lines, both in the lunch lines, the cafeteria lines, in front of the business office, in the main office, in the counseling area, while the students are waiting in line outside of their advisors' classrooms as well. We have painted dots that are 6 foot spaced out, trying to just really get in front of keeping kids. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're going to be providing tons of training just to kind of reinforce that throughout the day for our students.
Good.
Mark, the one place that we won't be able to have the dots necessarily for all the students that might be waiting is in that entry process at the beginning of the school day, when the students are confirming their health check. We would have dots going clear out, on the sidewalks and all across the campus. And so what we're going to message is just that we're asking students to maintain that 6 foot distancing between the student ahead of them and the student behind them as they're waiting to confirm their health check and enter the building.
And I take it, move quickly, getting those health checks done.
Quickly as possible.
Yeah. So Becky, tell us about what happens if we suspect a student might have one of the symptoms of COVID, and how do we work with the staff, the parents, et cetera?
Well, we know that this will look different at the secondary level than it does at elementary level, just because you won't have the teaching staff won't have the students in the classroom all day like they would at elementary. But if a student is sick at school, and we know that does happen, we are exceptionally careful about this year. Normal years, we're still going to want to send kids home when they're sick. This year, that's even more important. And so if a student is sick, they're sent to the health room where the nursing staff can assess the student and see if they have symptoms of COVID. And if they do, we are going to have that student wait in the student waiting room. It's also called an isolation room. You may hear that as well. And it's just really a place for kids to wait for their parent to come pick them up. And we're going to recommend that they be tested for COVID. And so in order for a student to come back to school, when either they've been sent home sick or they have called in sick, they need to have a note from their provider that says that they don't have COVID. They have to have proof of a negative COVID test, or if the parent chooses not to test the student, then they need to stay out for 10 days from the start of their symptoms. And so we have really been fortunate to be able to have testing now in our schools. We have 4 main sites that staff, students, and families can go be tested for COVID. That's at Chase, Shadle, Linwood, and Grant. Those are the 4 locations, and it is on our website. And so we try to make that as convenient as possible for families to be able to access COVID testing. And it's completely optional. I know I get a lot of questions about that. This is not mandatory COVID testing. You have to register your student for a test and take them to be tested. So yeah, we really want to be able to work with families and support them during this time. We do know kids have chronic conditions that may have some symptoms that mimic COVID. And so the relationship with office staff and nursing staff in your building, really knowing your kids, knowing what their normal baseline health is, please do have that conversation with us so that we know when your kid is sick or we're just seeing, your students, like their allergies, for example. So.
And maybe this is the right time to ask about the contact tracing. So why the seating charts are so important, both in the classroom and in the lunchroom and so forth. What does your staff do, and so that we don't have to have a lot of kids stay home?
Well, my staff is amazing, and our small group of nurses that we have contact tracing these cases, they really have made this a safe experience for us to be open and back in school. And so those seating charts are really important. So those contact tracing nurses, we know which kids are sitting around any students who may have tested positive for COVID. We really want our quarantining to be targeted, and we do that according to health department guidance, of course. But we don't want to have to get into a situation where we're quarantining an entire classroom. And so the way that we do that is by having seating charts, so we know exactly who is sitting next to who. And that gives us enough information that we're able to, again, have a very targeted quarantining of students who might be affected.
Very good. So training, tonight's the start of that, getting you oriented, but Sandra, maybe you could start off with what we're going to be sending home to parents for training videos for them to share with their students. And then we'll ask Sean and Jeremy to share some of the other activities that'll be happening to get students ready to go and parents ready to go.
Sure. Yes. On Wednesday, you will be receiving a postcard with this information. And if you look to the lower right-hand corner, that is a photo of a great video that the communications department put together. It's called Return to In-Person Learning, Health Guidelines for Secondary Students. And it does a really great job of talking about face coverings, healthcare check, also how students can disinfect their desk, hand washing, social distancing, information on lockers. It's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds that I would definitely recommend for parents and students to watch together. And if you are looking for any more information on this, you can go to spokaneschools.org/back-to-school 2020.
And Sean, Jeremy was describing some of the training activities they're planning at SAC. So this is for 7th graders. This will be their first time at a middle school and their first time at the school. What kind of activities across the district are being planned to help 7th graders? I guess they don't have to find their locker, which is the normal dread, because they aren't going to use their locker. But
yeah, and it's very similar to what Jeremy described across the district at all of our middle schools. Each of them has a plan for bringing in groups of students to help get them familiar with the campus, and obviously get them familiar with the protocols in this new circumstance that we're in. I think all of them are talking about a similar plan to give students an opportunity to move about from class period to class period, so they get familiar with their schedule, learn where the main areas of the building are, like bathrooms and cafeteria and whatnot. And obviously it's to welcome them and make sure that first day is successful, and that they understand, again, those detailed protocols like the health check, like how lunch is going to work before that first day. All the schools are doing the communication a little bit different. Some of them are making some videos to help communicate as well, in addition to having those 7th graders and maybe new students to the school on site And all of that, each school is doing their own plan, so they're going to be communicating out to their own families and students regarding what their school's plan is.
Jeremy, does that include for you? Are you doing, it's been a year since your now 8th graders were in school as 7th graders. Are they getting some new orientation to school as well?
They are, yeah. We're so excited to get kids back. A couple things. First, I would kind of echo what Sean said. The middle school principals have really been calibrating, and Sean's been leading a lot of that work to make sure we're all kind of on board, following kind of the same procedures and policies, and make sure we have a communication and plan that's really going to be supportive of our kids. SAC specific, I would say a couple things. We sent a message out last week, followed up by a phone message. It included all the links of all the videos. We also added it to our Facebook and our Twitter and all of our social media, and it's on the www.sacthunderbirds.com. We've added it there as well. And I sent a follow-up communication tonight as well, directing families to sacthunderbirds.com so they can kind of see that for themselves. And then all of the schools are also following that up through the advisory, and that just opening first couple of days of school, we're going to be reinforcing all of that again through lessons that are going to go throughout the whole day, through all of our classes. There'll be little breakout lessons about just getting our kids ready and making sure they're ready to just kind of get back to learning.
And Heather and Jeremy, you both mentioned advisory for an incoming 7th grader who's never been at a middle school. What's an advisory?
Do you want to go first, Heather?
I'll start. It's kind of my personal passion. Like I said, advisory is your family at school. And all of our students, while learning remotely, have been connected to an advisor. They start every day while they've been in distance learning with that same advisor. And it's roughly 20 to 25 minutes that's set aside that we connect, focus on social emotional learning, lay out logistics, answer questions. It's fostering that really strong relationship with at least one advocate in the school who knows you, who knows your story, who can connect you to other kids or other interests. And they're really your advocate. And I mean, I learned about it and from it while being a teacher at Sacagawea, and I'm so glad that as a district we have made that decision for all of our students. I don't know what Jeremy would want to add.
I would just add a couple things. A couple things for us. Heather talked about the character strong, and that's where we teach that social emotional learning. We also have our positive behavior intervention supports that we do out of there as well, and that's really just kind of teaching kids how to be excellent citizens within our school community and our school, and that lands right in that advisory as well. One of the things that we're doing, we're really excited about for our school and our students as we start, is we're also building in our advisory lessons the first week is an off day planning calendar for the kids. So we're really trying to build their capacity in that off day when they're not at school on that first day. We have a whole breakdown of what they could be doing in all of those sessions for an off day planning calendar. So just some great things to make sure kids are ready to learn.
Very good, thank you. So the first day of school, we are going to be asking parents to say their goodbyes to students if you're bringing them to school outside, not to come inside. We do have social distancing markers out there so that everybody's practicing staying 6 feet apart, family to family. Face coverings are required on that first day of school. So it'll be a little bit different than the normal first day of school. But it's a good way to get started. We'll have staff there to direct students into the school. And of course, many of the schools are doing some orientation activities already, so students know their way around. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Heather Bybee, who can serve as a moderator for these last few minutes of the webinar to answer some of the burning questions that seem to be some of the key questions that families are asking. So Heather, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Anderson. I am going to start with a question for Dr. Swinyard, and it's twofold. It's why hybrid in terms of both it as an instructional model and versus being either full remote or full in person.
Yeah, so the first part of that is why hybrid? So why are we running a schedule with only half the kids attending at any one time? So part of the governor's proclamation and one of the requirements that if you're going to have kids in buildings, so it was left to school districts were given some autonomy to work with their local health districts and follow their guidance. One overarching statewide umbrella is that if kids are in school, they have to be 6 feet apart. That's a non-negotiable. That's not up to local school districts. It's not up to local health districts. That's the governor, part of the governor's proclamation. In our classrooms, in our middle and high schools, in order to get students in there and create 6 feet of social distancing, there's not enough room to have 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 kids in the class, which we would typically have in a second grade. And so our only option is to have half of them come one day and half of them come the other. Otherwise, we would need exponentially more classrooms and more classrooms than we currently have. We would need, essentially more schools, more classrooms in order to create that much space, which then we would need more teachers. So you can see the logistics of that get insurmountable really quickly. Most districts across the state and country are running a hybrid model where half come one day, half come the next. The next logical question is, well, what do students do when they're at home? And when we started this process in the summer and started exploring, looking at research, as we continued that process through the fall, most of the time, people's initial reaction to that is, well, just turn the camera on and have kids live at home watching what's happening in the classroom. And that's typically a really common first reaction. And that was our first reaction, is we'll just turn the camera on and the kids at home can watch what's happening and it'll be just like they were there. And as we talked to educational experts, and as we looked at available learning, and in the research, it's typically called synchronous or asynchronous learning. As we did that work, and as we started to look and watch and learn from other school districts across the country attempting those models, what we found out pretty quickly is, in fact, that it's very ineffective. And in fact, it makes the students at home in a passive environment, like they're watching TV. It makes it hard to engage them actively. It also makes it very cumbersome logistically for the teacher to provide and monitor students both virtually and in person. And in fact, in many cases, they end up covering less content and less ground. And so that was a conversation that we spent a lot of time thinking and talking about. And so our decision was to really look at that research, listen to the educational experts, look at what was happening in other states. Texas, for example, started out by having across their entire state, having students be live at home and have students in the classroom. And it was so problematic that they made a shift across their state. And there are other examples across the country. That's why we made that decision. We believe it's going to best position kids for learning. It's not perfect. No one would suggest that it's perfect, but we believe it's going to be the most effective model based on what we've heard and what we've learned from other places, other educators. We're going to send out a communication from you that has a podcast from an educational expert named Jeff Utek, and he talks and explains some of that rationale from an outside perspective for those of you that are interested in learning more and going deeper. But we realize this is not perfect, and there is no option that is going to be ideal until we get all of our students back full time. That won't happen until that 6-foot social distancing requirement changes. In terms of students being at home learning, the state has provided lots of flexibility around what constitutes instructional hours, instructional days. And so teachers on their in-person day will be providing instruction, setting kids up for the day that they're at home. They'll be setting the stage, working with them, laying out what that looks like. And then as students go home, they take that work home as an extension to work, to practice, to refine. Teachers will be available for check-in periods throughout that schedule for students to connect. And then when they come back that next day, when it's in person for them, then again, they build on the practice that they did at home on the questions, and they begin setting the stage for the next day.
Thank you. I'm hoping we can go just a couple minutes long because there was some really popular questions in the chat that I just wanted to make sure that we could attend to publicly. So one was about ID cards, knowing that the vast majority of our students will be either brand new to the school as 7th graders or never really finished a full year as 8th graders. If someone could explain what an ID card is and when they'll get them, and there was just lots of questions about ID cards.
you want me to jump in and talk about this, Sean, or?
You go ahead. Yep, I'll follow you.
Okay, so SAC specific, I can talk about the ID cards. The ID cards are going to be, they come with a lanyard. They're going to be provided to the students in that advisory on that very first day. So we're going to have them all ready to go, alphabetized for kids, and we are requiring students to wear them every day. At our school, we'll use them for the students maybe who forget to do their attestation. We can actually use it to send them right to the front, and we have scanners ready to go to scan the students to make sure that the attestations are ready and we can follow all of our COVID protocols.
I would just say, I think the initial ID badges are temporary ones, and then they'll be getting permanent ones later. Each school will receive those temporary ones ahead of time, and they've got a plan for getting them to the students, like Jeremy said, in advisory, or some of them might be handing them out to the students as they're in line for the health check on that first day.
I'm coming back to you, Sean. Can you just talk about the timeline for sports?
You bet. At the middle school level, we have the activity coordinators have been working all year in putting together a proposal that was approved by our local regional health district. They've also been following WIAA guidelines. That's the state organization that oversees middle school and high school athletics. Our coaches are being trained on the specific protocols. There are specific sports protocols, so coaches will know those. The plan is to do no extracurricular the first week that we're back. The March 8th, each school will be planning some after-school intramural activities, and that will vary from school to school, and there'll be communication about that. There'll be a couple of 2-week windows of intramurals, and then after spring break, there are 2 sports seasons with the low and moderate middle school sports planned. And again, all the protocols for those sports based on the guidelines from the state will be followed.
Thank you. Nurse Becky, can students do their own attestation?
So what we really encourage is for parents to do that, but we also are aware that there are certain circumstances where particularly high school students will probably be doing this on their own. So I would ask that if you're going to have your student fill it out, that's something that you would want to walk through with your student. But at middle school level, I'm thinking probably the parent needs to be doing that at home.
Thank you. Adam, if the family chose to not check out a student laptop, are we asking them to bring their home laptop, or are we saying that we'll provide materials for them once they're on site?
Nope, we'll have every student in our district has a student issued laptop ready for them. So if they checked it out to have it home during virtual learning, then they would bring that to school with them. If they didn't check out that laptop, it's waiting for them at their school.
Thanks. Sandra, when are bus routes going to be available?
They're going to be available February 26th after 4 p.m. So you'll receive that link in the letter that goes out on Wednesday, but you just won't be able to access the schedules till Friday.
Should they get registered, Sandra, before then, though?
Yes, I believe registration is available. It's just the schedule that won't be up until Friday.
And then one last question, and I will give this one to Jeremy Oakes on books. Lots of concerns. So as we say, they're going to carry backpacks and laptops. Is the expectation that students bring in their math book, their English book, their social studies book every single day with their lunch?
That's a great question. We talked to a mom the other day. The little girl only weighs 62 pounds. So trying to lug that sucker back and forth to school is going to be pretty crazy. So the answer is no. Our teachers are not requiring students to take textbooks back and forth. A lot of that stuff lives digitally right on their computer anyway. So our teachers have really tried to get away from anything that would be an extra weight or an extra thing for the student to carry back and forth. So just pretty simple stuff: their laptop, their charger, maybe a couple pens and pencils, a couple writing utensils, and we'll try to store stuff in the class the best that we can.
Thanks. So with that, Adam, I know we ran a little long. I know this panel believes that middle school matters. What would be your parting words of advice for middle school families as they're planning for next week?
Yeah, I would just say that transitions are hard for kids at any age. Any transition is hard. We know that kids transitioning to middle school, that's a big deal. Transitioning to high school is a big deal. This change is going to be a big deal for students, and just really encourage you to talk with them about it. Encourage them to share what they're excited about, what they're worried about, what they wonder about. The more that you can get them talking, the better. They want you to believe that they don't need you anymore, that they're all grown up. And in fact, they need you right now more than ever. And they need you to lean in and be there for them and check in on them and ask them how their day is going and ask them how they're feeling. So we just really encourage you to really engage them on this transition. And I just want to say in closing, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. This has been so hard. And you as parents and guardians have been incredible. Our teachers and staff have worked so hard. Not everyone agrees with the decisions, and we recognize that. But we just thank you for your perseverance, you hanging in there with us, you hanging in there with your kids as teachers, with their administrators. We answered over 100 questions tonight. Apologize for the ones we didn't get to. And thank you for all the comments that we received in the chat of appreciation and gratitude. We don't take that lightly, and it means the world to us to have you recognize the effort that our team has done and that our staff have done in our schools. And we're going to get through this. Normal, whatever that means in the future, we're going to get back to a typical school experience, and we're going to get on the other side of this. And what we're going to remember the most is how we navigated it together, and the way that we worked together, the way that we were together as a community and collaborated and listened to each other, and found common interest, and also respected differencing of opinions. So thank you for everything you've done. You are such at the heart of what makes Spokane such a great place to live, and what makes our school district a great place for kids to attend every day. So thank you again for being here. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to email any one of us. We're happy to follow up with you, and we wish you well in the days ahead, and we can't wait to see your students next week. So take care and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.